More than 42% of violent crimes in rural areas during the Middle Ages never reached a courtroom. Most simply vanished into cold soil and colder silence. But here's the question that has baffled every historian who has studied village life in the 13th century. How did a community with no sheriff, no police, and no trained investigators solve a brutal murder before sunrise? Imagine a tiny medieval village where the law is nothing more than a memory. No mounted patrols. No judges nearby. No one to call if a crime happens, except the people who live beside you, share your fields, and depend on you for survival. In a world where justice was fragile, how did a single night change everything? It happened in a settlement so small it didn't appear on maps until centuries later, Branford Hollow, a farming village deep inside the forests of East Anglia. Fewer than 100 souls lived there. People survived by knowing every sound of the woods, every footprint in the mud, and every voice that spoke around the communal fire. In such a place, nothing could stay hidden for long, or so they believed. But on a cold, moonless night in 1294, something happened that shook the village's fragile order. It started with a scream. Just before midnight, Agnes Fletcher, wife of a charcoal burner, heard it echo through the trees behind her cottage. Sharp, short, choked at the end. The kind that carries panic. She froze, listening. Then came another sound, quick footsteps, then silence. By morning, the body would be found, face down by the riverbank, throat cut so deeply it nearly severed the spine. A young man, no more than 20, the stranger to some but not to all. His name was Rowan Hale. But the most terrifying part? No sheriff would be coming. No knight. No royal investigator. The nearest authority was 2 days away. In Branford Hollow, the villagers had until dawn to decide, let fear take root or take justice into their own hands. What they did next would become one of the most remarkable examples of community investigation in medieval Europe. The night Rowan Hale was killed, the elders rang the village bell, a hammer striking an iron bowl hung from a crooked post. The sound rolled through the darkness, calling every man and woman from their homes. Flames from torches flickered across faces twisted with shock and with fear. Because a murder didn't just mean death. It meant danger. It meant instability. And worst of all, it meant someone in the darkness might be watching them even now. They gathered in the center of the village. Farmers, shepherds, weavers, children clinging to parents. And at the front stood Edric Thorne, Branford Hollow's reeve. Middle-aged, broad-shouldered, and carrying the only iron-tipped spear the village owned. Though appointed by no king and paid nothing, he was the closest thing they had to authority. He looked at Rowan's lifeless body laid before them. His clothes soaked with river water. His pale face slack in the torchlight. "We must find who did this," Edric said, his voice steady but hollow. "By dawn." A hush followed. Why dawn? Because medieval England lived under the Frank Pledge system, a law requiring every group of 10 households to police itself. If a crime was not solved quickly, the entire community could be fined. For a poor village like Branford Hollow, that fine meant starvation. Losing homes. Losing winter stocks. Losing livestock to pay for royal punishment. Failure to solve this murder meant ruin. That's why the clock was already ticking. Branford Hollow had 3 hours until sunrise. There was no time for fear. They began with the simplest act, search the body. Martha, the midwife, sharp-eyed despite her age, was the first to kneel. Her fingers ran over Rowan's clothing, gentle but practiced. She noticed things others missed. No sign of struggle on his arms. No dirt under his nails. No defensive wounds. But something was strange. His boots were spotless. Impossible for someone walking the muddy paths after rain. He was moved. Killed elsewhere. Brought to the river. The villagers murmured nervously. Then Tom Fletcher, a farmer, stepped forward. He lived at the southern hut. "I saw him returning from the forest this afternoon with a sack. Maybe something in the woods happened." Edric nodded but frowned. The forest was too big to search in the dark. They needed something faster. That's when Agnes Fletcher spoke up again, the woman who heard the scream. "I heard more than that," she said. "A voice. Angry. A man's voice. and footsteps too heavy to be Rowan's. Someone ran toward the old mill. All heads turned. The old watermill was abandoned for years. No miller lived there now. Only rats, broken beams, and shadows. But it was also the perfect place to hide. Or meet. Or kill. Edric didn't hesitate. We searched the mill. 6 men with torches followed him down the winding path. The building loomed out of the dark like the skeleton of some forgotten beast. The wheel lay half-rotted in the water. The door hung crooked, banging against the frame in the wind. Inside, dust danced in torchlight. Empty. Or so they thought. Then Tom whispered, "Look. Footprints. Fresh." Mud pushed deep into the ground. The prints were wide, heavy. Not Rowan's. They followed the trail. Through the main room. Past the broken millstone. To the back wall, where a wooden panel was slightly ajar. A hidden compartment. Edric motioned for silence. They lifted the torch. Inside the compartment lay a cloth bundle. The reeve opened it. What he found turned the investigation on its head. Inside were silver coins. More than any villager had ever owned. Enough to buy a horse. Enough to buy land. Enough to pay debts. Stolen money. Someone had been hiding wealth. And near the coins lay something else. A blood-stained knife. Not the simple kind used for farming. This was sharpened, narrow, suited for piercing. A murder weapon. But the most shocking part? On the knife's wooden handle was a carving. A symbol. A circle with a slash through it. Every villager froze. They had seen that symbol before. It was the personal mark of Alfred Cutler, a tanner who lived near the edge of the woods. Known for his temper. Known for debts. Known for quarrels with Rowan Hale, especially over the past month. But now the fear deepened. Why hide money? Why hide a knife? Why hide in the mill? Edric made a decision. We bring Alfred forward. But when they reached his home, he was gone. The door stood open. The fire in the hearth still warm. A cloak missing from its hook. Boots gone from beside the bed. He had run. Or someone made him run. Something was wrong, and the villagers sensed it. Branford Hollow was small. Alfred had nowhere to go. The forest was dark and wet. The roads dangerous. Wolves prowled at night. So why leave his home in such a hurry? He didn't know Rowan was dead. He wasn't the one who killed him. Back at the center of the village, the tension grew thick. Edric stood silent, thinking, while people argued. It must be Alfred. No, he's a coward but not a murderer. Rowan was mixed up in something. Someone is trying to frame him. Why leave your own knife behind? It was a fair question. Would a murderer really leave a weapon marked with his personal symbol? Too obvious. Too convenient. Edric realized something then. Villagers solved crimes not by training, but by knowing the patterns of human behavior. They didn't have forensics, but they had instinct, and instinct was often just another word for expertise. He turned to Martha, the midwife. You know how people move. How blood behaves. Tell me, was Rowan killed here, or somewhere else? Martha didn't hesitate. There's not enough blood, she said. Whoever did this killed him somewhere clean and dry. Then carried him. Perhaps to confuse us. Or to accuse someone else, Edric murmured. If it wasn't Alfred, then who? They retraced Rowan's steps from earlier that day. Several villagers saw him carrying a sack from the forest. Rowan often collected herbs and plants to sell in the market. But today he looked anxious. Sweaty. What was in the sack? And where was it now? As they questioned the villagers, Edric pieced together something surprising. Rowan visited 3 places that day. The forest near the old Roman road. The tanner's workshop, Alfred's place. The abandoned mill. Why go to all 3 in one afternoon? Unless Rowan discovered something. Or someone was following him. A breakthrough came unexpectedly. Little Emma Hartley, only 10 years old, tugged on Edric's cloak. I saw Rowan near the Roman stones, she whispered shyly. He was hiding something. He looked scared. Edric crouched to her level. What did you see exactly, child? A wooden chest, she said. Small. He put it under a rock. A chest. Hidden. Suddenly, the stolen silver coins made more sense. Rowan found treasure. Or something valuable. And treasure is the quickest way to get yourself killed in a medieval village. Edric gathered the search party and hurried toward the Roman road. The wind was rising. Dawn was creeping closer. They had less than an hour now. The forest swallowed them as they walked. Twisted branches arced overhead, forming strange shapes in the torchlight. Wolves howled somewhere far away. At the Roman ruins, simple stone slabs half buried under moss, they found it. A rock had been moved. Beneath it lay a small box. Rowan had indeed hidden something. Inside, wrapped in cloth, were more coins, but also a parchment. A message. And when Edric unrolled it, the villagers gasped. It wasn't written in English. It was written in Latin. Only one person in Bramford Hollow knew Latin well. Father Elias, the village priest. A tall, soft-spoken man with gentle eyes. A scholar once, before sickness brought him to Bramford Hollow. He had been Rowan's teacher. And Rowan, everyone knew, often helped him with monastery errands. Could Father Elias read it? But could he be trusted? The villagers exchanged nervous glances. They walked back to the village with the chest, the coins, and the parchment, finding the priest already awake, standing outside the chapel, candle in hand, as though waiting for them. "Something troubles you," he said. Edric handed him the parchment. Father Elias read silently. His face went pale. Then he whispered, "This is a list of debts. Payments. Bribes." "Bribes?" Edric asked. "To whom?" The priest swallowed. "To a royal tax collector. These coins are part of a scheme. Someone has been stealing from the crown." The villagers stiffened. Stealing from the king meant execution. Suddenly, the murder wasn't just personal. It was political. "Who wrote it?" Tom asked. Father Elias hesitated. "Rowan was helping me copy documents from the monastery. But this is different. This was not meant for our eyes." "Who stands to lose the most if this list is revealed?" Edric asked quietly. The priest's silence said everything. A name formed in everyone's mind. Not Alfred the Tanner. Not a poor villager. Someone bigger. Someone dangerous. Someone desperate. Because only one man in Bramford Hollow had direct dealings with royal agents. Only one man collected taxes for the crown. Only one man had enough to lose everything if his corruption was exposed. Oswin Mercer, the richest man in the village. Owner of the grain storehouses. Landlord of half the cottages. A man whose smile warmed his customers and chilled everyone else. Edric's blood ran cold. If Oswin discovered Rowan uncovering his secret, he had motive. He had power. He had wealth. And he had a reason to kill. But where was Oswin now? When they returned to the village square, Oswin's house stood dark. No candle. No servants. No sounds. Edric pushed the door. It creaked open. Inside, the fireplace was warm. A cloak missing. Muddy footprints on the wooden floor. 2 sets. One heavy. One lighter. Someone left in a hurry. Someone fled. Or someone chased. Then Martha's voice rang out from outside. "Tracks. Leading to the river." Every villager rushed toward her torch. Footprints. 2 sets. Running. One set matched Rowan's boots. He wasn't brought to the river dead. He was chased there. And the second set? Longer. Stride wider. Heel worn down. Edric recognized them immediately. Oswin Mercer's boots. The truth was becoming clear. Oswin chased Rowan to the riverbank. Rowan knew about the corruption. Rowan had proof. Rowan tried to escape. Oswin silenced him. But there was one problem. If Oswin was the killer, why hide evidence at the old mill? Why leave money there? Why leave the knife? Unless Oswin planted the evidence to frame Alfred. A convenient scapegoat. A poor man. A man with debts. A man no one would defend. The pieces fit. Too well. But something still felt off. If Oswin killed Rowan, why was he running now? Where was he going? Did someone warn him? Did someone help him? Time was slipping away. Dawn stained the sky faint pink. They had minutes left to find the killer, or the crown would punish the entire village. Then a shout echoed across the fields. "By the bridge! Someone's moving!" The villagers ran as fast as their legs could carry them. There, near the stone bridge, two figures struggled in the dim light. Someone pushed another into the water. Edric shouted, "Stop!" Torches flared. The figures froze. The man standing at the edge wasn't Oswin. It was Alfred. And in the river below, gasping and sputtering, was Oswin Mercer, his cloak heavy with water, his face twisted with terror. Alfred looked at the villagers, chest heaving. He tried to flee. I grabbed him. I wasn't going to let him escape. Oswin shouted from the water, voice cracking. "I didn't kill him. I swear it." Silence fell. Both men were pulled from the river, shivering, coughing, staring at one another with raw hatred. The truth was near, but not yet clear. And the sun was rising. Edric stood before the villagers, breathing hard. The decision had to be made now. Who murdered Rowan Hale? Who was lying? Who was desperate? Who was dangerous? Who had the most to lose? Oswin raised trembling hands. "Rowan was blackmailing me. He demanded silver. He threatened to tell the crown about my dealings if I didn't pay him. I hid the silver in the mill because it wasn't safe in my house." The villagers murmured. "Could it be true?" Alfred shouted back, "Lies? Rowan told me Oswin was cheating the king. He wanted to bring the documents to the reeve. Oswin killed him to stay rich." The villagers fell into argument. Edric raised a hand. "Enough." He turned to Father Elias. "Which one is lying?" The priest closed his eyes and whispered only one sentence. "Rowan came to me last night. He said Oswin wasn't the one stealing from the crown." A shock rolled through the crowd. "Not Oswin." Father Elias opened his eyes and revealed the truth no one expected. Father Elias opened his eyes slowly, and the night seemed to hold its breath around him. His voice trembled as he spoke, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was about to admit. "Rowan told me Oswin wasn't the one stealing from the crown," he said. "And he told me the real thief was someone none of you would ever suspect." Every villager leaned in, torches crackling, breath visible in the cold air. Even Oswin, shivering by the riverbank, seemed to forget about his wet cloak. Edric's jaw tightened. "Who?" Father Elias swallowed hard. He said the thief was a man who handled money often. A man who traveled. A man who had access to the monastery's records. Murmurs swept through the villagers. Traveling merchants? Carter boys? Maybe the grain measurer? But the priest's next words froze them all. "He meant me." The silence was absolute. Even the wind paused. Emma Hartley, the little girl from earlier, stepped closer, clutching her mother's hand. "Father T?" Martha, the midwife, shook her head. "No. This can't be." Alfred whispered, "What madness is this?" But Father Elias held up a hand. "Let me explain." His face was hollow with guilt. "Years ago, when I first came here, the church roof had collapsed. The walls were crumbling. We had no funds, no help. No one cared about this forgotten place." His voice cracked, raw with memory. "So I diverted a portion of the crown's tithe. Only a little. Just enough to repair the roof. Then the walls. Then to purchase candles, books." Edric stared at him. "You stole from the king." Father Elias nodded. "Yes. And I justified it to myself. Told myself it was for God's house. Told myself no one would notice. Told myself it wasn't truly theft if the people benefited." Martha's eyes softened. "Father, you saved this village's chapel." He didn't let her finish. "But I still sinned. I still broke the law. And Rowan found out." Edric took a slow step toward him. "How?" "He was helping me sort old records. He saw discrepancies. He asked questions. He followed the trail. And when he confronted me, he wasn't angry. He wasn't greedy. He was afraid." "Afraid of you?" Alfred asked. "No," Father Elias said. "Afraid of what the crown would do to all of you if the truth came out." The villagers shifted uneasily. Edric's mind raced. If what the priest said was true, everything changed. But something still didn't fit. "Father," he said quietly, "Rowan was killed by someone strong enough to drag him across the forest. Someone who knew how to use a blade. Someone desperate. Someone who left a staged crime scene. You're a scholar. A gentle man. You couldn't have done this. That's what Rowan believed too, the priest whispered. And that, he continued, is why he died. Another silence. He raised a trembling finger. But not by my hand. A wave of relief washed over the villagers, but only for a moment. Because then the fear returned. If the priest wasn't the murderer, then who killed Rowan? Edric was thinking fast. The evidence. The footprints. The knife planted to frame Alfred. The money hidden in the mill. Oswin chasing Rowan, but not killing him. Pieces scattered like a broken mosaic. And the parchment. The list of bribes and illegal payments. The one Rowan dug up. Edric turned to Father Elias. Did Rowan say who else was involved? Who else was stealing? Who else had something to hide? The priest closed his eyes again. And said one word. Yes. Everyone leaned closer. Then who? Edric demanded. Father Elias exhaled, long and weary, as if the truth itself burned. Rowan told me he found proof that the one siphoning money from the crown. He swallowed. Was the Reeve of Branford Hollow. The Reeve? Edric Thorne. The torches flickered wildly. Several villagers gasped. A child cried. Others stepped back from the Reeve as if the accusation itself were a knife. Edric didn't move. He didn't blink. He simply stared at Father Elias, face unreadable. You accuse me, he said quietly. The priest nodded. Rowan believed you used your office to collect more than you reported. He thought you were taking a portion of the village taxes before transporting them. He told me he planned to confront you at dawn. Martha shook her head. No, this can't be. Alfred looked stunned. Edric has been Reeve for 10 years. He's never taken more than his due. Oswin, still shivering, whispered hoarsely, or he hid it well. Dozens of eyes turned to Edric. The Reeve lifted his torch, lighting his own face clearly. If I were guilty, he said, I would have fled hours ago. Or, Oswin snarled, you stayed to appear innocent. Edric turned to Father Elias. What proof did Rowan have? The priest held up the parchment. His notes. His calculations. They match your collection tallies, but with gaps. Edric shook his head slowly. I never stole a single coin. Oswin spat on the ground. Lies. Edric's eyes flashed with sudden anger. You think I'd risk my family's life? My own? You think I'd betray this village? The villagers grew tense, shifting from foot to foot. Father Elias held up a hand. Please. Listen. Rowan was confused. He told me he didn't have all the facts. He only had suspicions. But he feared someone would kill him for asking questions. Edric's voice dropped. And he was right. The priest nodded. Yes. But it wasn't you. Edric blinked. The villagers stared, bewildered. Father Elias' voice turned thin and cold. He told me the real thief had help. Edric's stomach twisted. Help? From who? The priest closed his eyes. From someone strong. Someone skilled with a blade. Someone who knew the forest paths. Someone who could twist a man's neck in a fight. A murmur spread. The butcher? The blacksmith? The huntsman? Then Father Elias whispered the name. Richard Thorne. Edric froze. Richard Thorne. His younger brother. A man rarely seen these days. A man with a violent past. A man who fled Branford Hollow 2 years earlier after a drunken brawl turned deadly, escaping royal justice, disappearing into the forests, becoming little more than a rumor. Edric spoke slowly, voice strained. My brother hasn't been seen in years. He returned, Father Elias said. When? Edric's voice cracked. Tonight, the priest replied. Rowan told me he saw him. That Richard was meeting someone. And Rowan believed Richard was the one transporting stolen silver from the village to rogue traders on the Roman road. Edric staggered back a step. It couldn't be. Richard? A thief? A conspirator? The villagers' expressions shifted. Fear, disbelief, betrayal. Martha put a hand on Edric's shoulder. We know you. We trust you. But family can be blind. Edric gritted his teeth. My brother may be many things, but not a murderer. Father Elias spoke softly. Rowan said Richard threatened him. Edric's chest tightened. No. He said Richard told him to stop asking questions, or he'd end up dead. No, Edric whispered again, louder, angrier. But Father Elias continued. And Rowan said he believed Richard killed a man in another village last winter. Edric's world swayed. His breath shook. And for the first time that night, true fear entered his eyes. The villagers sensed it. Edric, the calm, steady leader, was unraveling. Martha whispered, Edric, did your brother return tonight? He didn't answer. Not immediately. Then he spoke in a hollow voice. I found tracks near my house. Boot prints. Fresh. Covered by leaves as if someone tried to hide them. And something else. He swallowed. My spear was missing. Guess. A weapon strong enough to kill. Alfred stepped forward. You think Richard took it? Edric nodded once. And now he's gone again. Father Elias whispered, he killed Rowan. Edric's eyes hardened. No. Edric, the priest said gently, you know it's true. The reeve shook his head violently. Richard might steal. He might threaten. But murder? That's not him. Oswin barked a humorless laugh. A killer always has family saying he's not a killer. Edric rounded on him. You're one to talk, Mercer. The crowd erupted, accusations, cries of shock, whispers of fear. Edric raised both hands. Quiet. But the villagers didn't stop. They were spiraling. The fear of sunrise. The fear of royal punishment. The fear of the killer still being among them. Or worse, watching from the woods. Edric turned to Father Elias. What else did Rowan say? Everything. Tell me everything. The priest hesitated. Then nodded. He reached into his cloak and pulled out something small. A torn piece of cloth. Stiff. Stained. He held it up. Rowan gave me this. He tore it from his attacker earlier that evening. He said the man grabbed him in the forest. Rowan escaped. But he ripped this from the attacker's coat. Edric stepped closer. The cloth was wool. Thick. Weather-worn. And on the edge was something unmistakable. A stitched emblem. A stag's head. The mark of the Thorn family. Edric felt the ground give way beneath him. Not possible. But it was. The emblem belonged to one person. Richard. His own brother. Edric's voice broke. Where did Rowan find him? Where was Richard? Father Elias answered softly. The old mill. Edric staggered. The mill. Where the silver was hidden. Where the knife was planted. Where Rowan had been heading before he died. Where Richard must have been waiting. It made sense. Horrible, perfect sense. The priest's voice trembled. Rowan escaped the mill. But Richard chased him. To the river. Rowan fell. Richard cut his throat. The villagers gasped. Edric shook his head. If Richard killed Rowan, why hide the weapon? Why frame Alfred? Why leave signs pointing to Oswin? The priest looked haunted. Because Rowan told me the corruption wasn't just Richard. Someone else was helping him hide the stolen silver. Someone powerful. Someone who wanted Alfred blamed. Someone who wanted Oswin blamed. Someone who wanted the village tearing itself apart. Edric's heart pounded. Who? Father Elias whispered. Richard wasn't working alone. The villagers exchanged confused looks. Edric's voice lowered to a whisper. Then who helped him? The priest answered. A villager who knew everyone's routines. Who could manipulate the investigation. Who could plant evidence. Someone trusted. Someone close. Edric's breath stopped. Someone close to the reeve. A cold wind blew through Bramford Hollow. The villagers looked at one another. Someone close to Edric? His wife? His cousins? His neighbors? His oldest friends? Father Elias spoke again. Rowan told me Richard had one partner. A man he called the Shadow. A man who never left the village. A man who could make a murder look like an accident. Edric whispered, "Name him." And Father Elias did. He spoke the name of the man who had betrayed Bramford Hollow. The man who had worked with Richard. The man who helped kill Rowan Hale. The man the villagers least expected. The murderer's partner, the priest said, was Corvin Pritchard. A stunned silence followed. Corvin. The quiet one. The humble one. The mill keeper's son. The man who repaired roofs and never raised his voice. The man who buried his wife last winter and had been withdrawn ever since. The man with a limp. The man who never hurt anyone. The man who, up until tonight, no one suspected of anything. Edric stared at Father Elias. Corvin? Are you certain? The priest nodded grimly. Rowan swore it with his dying breath. At that moment, a sound drifted from the far edge of the village. A creak. A footstep. A shadow moving between two houses. Edric spun toward it. Corvin, he shouted. A dark figure bolted into the trees. And the villagers chased him. Torches blazing. Hearts pounding. Fear turning into fury. The forest swallowed the crowd as they ran deeper and deeper, following the snapping branches and frantic footsteps. Corvin was running for his life. And for the first time all night, the villagers felt united, no longer suspects, no longer enemies, but hunters chasing a murderer through the dark woods of Bramford Hollow. They were close. Very close. They could hear him gasping. Could hear branches whipping his face. Could hear the panic in his breath. Edric yelled, "Stop. Corvin." But the man didn't stop. Not until the villagers cornered him at the edge of the ravine, trees opening into a steep drop, far too dark to climb safely. Corvin spun, chest heaving, torchlight trembling across his pale face. His eyes were filled with terror, guilt, and something else. Desperation. "Corvin," Edric said gently, "don't run." Corvin shook his head. "I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this." "Where is Richard?" Edric demanded. Corvin swallowed hard. "He's near. Watching." A chill crawled through the villagers. Richard Thorne. The unseen killer. In the woods with them. Close. Too close. Corvin's eyes darted behind the trees, terrified. "He made me do it," he whispered. "He said he'd kill me if I didn't help." Edric stepped closer. "Corvin, did you help Richard kill Rowan?" Corvin didn't answer. He sobbed. But the truth was there, in his shaking hands, in his trembling lips, in the way he sank to his knees. "Yes," he whispered. The villagers gasped. Corvin continued. "But I wasn't the one who cut him. That was Richard." Edric's heart sank. "Why did you help him?" Corvin raised hollow eyes. "Because Richard said he'd kill my daughter." The crowd stiffened. Edric took a step back. This case wasn't simple. It wasn't clean. It wasn't about greed. It was about fear. Corvin looked broken. "I didn't want Rowan dead. I didn't want anyone dead. Richard said the only way to hide the theft was to kill the one who discovered it. I begged him not to. I begged. But he..." A twig snapped. Close. Edric whipped around. Richard Thorne stepped out of the shadows. Sword drawn. Eyes wild. Breathing slow. Deadly. "Brother," Richard said softly. And the villagers realized the real nightmare was only beginning. Richard Thorne emerged from the shadows like a wolf stepping into firelight, unbothered, dangerous, and utterly calm. The torches flickered across his scarred face, his jaw set like stone. He wasn't running. He wasn't afraid. He was studying every villager as if calculating which one he'd kill first if they moved wrong. Edric's breath caught in his throat. This was the brother he once played with in the river, fished beside in quiet summers, shared bread with. But those memories dissolved when he saw the cold in Richard's eyes. Something had changed in him long before this night. "Brother," Richard said again, quieter this time. Edric slowly raised a hand to keep the villagers back. "Put the sword down." Richard laughed, a soft, chilling sound. "You always did like giving orders." His eyes shifted briefly to Corvin, still trembling on his knees. "Get up." Corvin didn't move. His entire body shook. "Please, don't hurt my daughter." Richard's jaw tensed. "You should have thought of her before helping Rowan. I trusted you, Corvin. You were supposed to keep your mouth shut." Edric stepped between them. "This ends now." Richard's gaze returned to him, sharp, amused. You think you can stop me? With what? A village full of pitchforks and shaking hands. Several men bristled at the insult, gripping their tools. Edric held up a hand. You killed Rowan. No, Richard said simply. I silenced a problem. You murdered him. Richard shrugged. He shouldn't have been poking into things he didn't understand. And what about the silver? Edric demanded. The bribes? The theft from the crown? Did you think no one would find out? Richard smirked. The silver kept this village alive more than the crown ever did. That's not your judgment to make. Richard took a step closer, lowering his sword slightly. I did what was necessary. You know how the world works, Edric. The king takes. The lords take. The stewards take. Everyone takes from us. I took something back. You stole from your own people, Edric said. Richard's smile faded. No. I stole from the crown. The people never felt it. I made sure of that. And if the crown caught you, brother? If they blamed the village? What then? Richard's jaw flexed. I was careful. Careful? Edric barked. You killed a boy. Richard's eyes narrowed. A boy who got in the way. The villagers gasped. Martha covered her mouth. Even Oswin looked horrified. Edric's voice dropped into something colder than the night air. Enough. Put the sword down. You will answer for what you've done. But Richard raised the blade instead. You always were the obedient one, he said softly. The king's little puppet. While I saw the truth, you don't survive by following rules. You survive by bending them. Edric's throat tightened. You're cornered. Surrender. Richard's eyes flicked to the ravine behind him, the steep drop swallowed in darkness. There was no escape. Yet his face remained calm. A predator's calm. You won't kill me, brother, Richard said. Edric's voice hardened. If you force my hand, I will. Richard tilted his head. Then let's see. Before Edric could react, Richard lunged, not at him, but at Alfred, the nearest villager. Alfred stumbled back, tripping on a root, and Richard's sword slashed the air where Alfred's head had been a heartbeat earlier. The villagers scattered in panic. Richard spun, fast as lightning, breaking through their circle. His blade sliced the torch from Tom's hand, plunging part of the clearing into darkness. Stop him! Edric shouted. They tried. But Richard was not a farmer. Not a laborer. He was a soldier, a man who had spent years in the wilderness, surviving by hunting, fighting, stealing. He moved with terrifying precision, dodging blows, weaving between trees, striking only when someone came too close. Corvin cried, He's going for the woods. Stop him! Edric grabbed a fallen branch and swung it like a staff. Richard blocked it effortlessly, sparks flying as would hit steel. You're slower than I remember, Richard said. You're worse than I remember, Edric shot back. For a moment, they were children again, fighting in the dirt behind their father's house. Then Richard kicked Edric hard in the chest, knocking him back. The reeve stumbled but stayed on his feet. Richard backed away, sword raised. Move aside. No. Move. Edric didn't flinch. Richard charged. Edric braced. But a figure darted from the side. It was Emma Hartley's father, a shepherd with nothing but a wooden crook. He swung it desperately, striking Richard's arm. The sword clattered from Richard's hand. The villagers gasped. Richard roared, grabbing the shepherd by the throat. He lifted him off the ground. Edric lunged, but Richard hurled the man aside like a rag doll before Edric could reach them. The shepherd crashed into a tree and collapsed with a cry of pain. Richard ran. Straight into the woods. Toward the old mill. Edric grabbed a burning torch. After him. Don't let him escape. The villagers surged forward. They chased Richard through the trees, torches lighting the forest with wild, dancing light. Branches whipped their faces. Roots grabbed at their ankles. The cold air burned their lungs. Edric ran faster than he'd ever run before. His brother was fast, but the villagers knew these woods. And every path converged on the same place. The mill. Its broken silhouette rose from the darkness like a ghost. Richard burst through the doorway. Edric followed with 10 villagers behind him. Inside, the place looked different in torchlight, strange shadows, broken gears, dust swirling. Richard stood there, panting, back to the far wall. The torchlight made his eyes blaze. "Stay where you are," Richard warned. "Drop the weapon," Edric demanded. Richard lifted a smaller blade he'd hidden earlier. He pressed it to his own forearm. The villagers froze. "Richard, don't do this," Edric said. Richard's grin was cold. "You think I fear death? After everything I've done?" "You should," Martha said, voice trembling. Richard ignored her. "Rowan wasn't supposed to die," he said suddenly. The villagers exchanged looks. Richard continued, voice hollow. "I told him to stay out of it. I warned him. But he kept pushing. He thought he could fix everything. He believed in fairness. In justice." Richard spat. "Fool. Then why kill him?" Edric asked. Richard laughed. "Because he ran his mouth. Because he brought people with him. Because he was going to expose everything." "And you could have stopped," Edric said. "You could have confessed." Richard shook his head. "You don't confess to men like the Crown. You hide. You fight. You survive." "Not anymore," Edric said. Richard's eyes softened, just for a moment. A flicker of something old. Something human. Then it vanished. He charged again. Edric met him head-on, torch raised. Richard knocked it aside, the flame hitting the floorboards. A small fire licked up the rotten wood. The villagers backed away. Richard slashed wildly. Edric dodged. The fire grew. Smoke curled through the air. Edric grabbed a wooden beam and swung it. Richard blocked, but the blow knocked him back. The floor shuddered. Richard coughed, eyes watering. "You won't win," he rasped. "I don't have to," Edric said. "I just have to stop you." Then the beam above Richard cracked. Part of the ceiling collapsed. Dust and splinters rained down. Richard stumbled. His blade flew from his hand. Edric tackled him, slamming him to the ground. Richard fought like a cornered wolf, snarling, punching, clawing. Edric took a fist to the jaw hard enough to make his ears ring. But he held on. The villagers rushed forward, pinning Richard's arms and legs. Richard screamed, "Let me go! Let me go!" But they didn't. Corvin pushed forward. His voice was shaking. "Where is the rest of the silver? The Crown will come. They'll punish us. Tell us where it is." Richard spat blood. "Rot in hell." Edric leaned over him. "If you ever cared about this village, even once, you'll tell me." Richard stared at his brother, hatred swirling with a strange sorrow. For a moment he seemed ready to answer. A beam collapsed. Fire erupted. Flames leapt up the side of the mill. Martha screamed, "We have to get out. The whole place is going to fall." The villagers surged back in panic. But Richard twisted violently, throwing 2 men off him. He scrambled toward the door. Edric lunged, but his brother slipped through the smoke and vanished into the night. The villagers rushed outside just as the mill ignited in a towering blaze. Richard was gone. And dawn was breaking. Oswin whispered, "The Crown will be here soon. If we don't catch him..." Edric finished the thought. "We all hang." The villagers turned to him, terrified. Edric clenched his fists. "We find him," he said. "And we finish this before sunrise." They had less than an hour before sunrise. And somewhere in the forest, Richard Thorne, wounded, cornered, and desperate, was trying to disappear into the dark. If he escaped, the Crown would punish everyone. The men, the women, the children, the old, the sick. Branford Hollow would be wiped from the king's roll as an example. Edric looked at the frightened faces of his villagers. "This ends now," he said. "We finish it together." Torches lifted. Boots pounded the ground. The villagers followed Edric into the woods one last time. They spread out across the forest, calling to one another in the cold gray pre-dawn light. "Tracks here. Broken branch. Blood on the roots." Richard was hurt. Moving fast but not cleanly. Survival for him now meant hiding, not fighting. But the forest betrayed him in small ways: bent grass, drops of blood, a handprint smeared on a tree trunk where he steadied himself. Edric followed the trail deeper into the woods, toward a place children whispered about, the hanging oak, an ancient tree twisted like a clenched fist, used in darker times for executions. As Edric neared the clearing, he heard slow, ragged breathing. He stepped forward. Richard sat with his back against the gnarled trunk, clutching his side. His sword lay just out of reach. Blood seeped through his shirt. His breath came in harsh, uneven pulls. He didn't look surprised to see Edric. "Took you long enough," he muttered. Edric stepped closer. "It's over." Richard smirked weakly. "Nothing's ever over. You know that." "You can still face this with dignity," Edric said. "Come with me. Answer for what you've done." Richard shook his head slowly. "I don't answer to kings. Or Reeves. Not anymore. You answer to the people you hurt." Richard's eyes darkened. "People hurt me first." Edric crouched, keeping distance. "What happened to you?" Richard looked away, jaw tight. For the first time, a flicker of humanity cracked through the hardened shell. "I tried to be like you once," he whispered. "Honest. Loyal. Serving the village. Serving the crown. What did it get me? A life of scraping by. Eating scraps. Watching the rich grow fat while the rest of us prayed for rain. That doesn't justify murder." Richard laughed bitterly. "Justify? Nothing justifies anything. The world doesn't care about right and wrong. It cares about power." He coughed, a harsh wet sound. "They made me into this." "No," Edric said. "You made choices. You could have stopped at theft. But Rowan, he was a boy, Richard. A good boy." Richard's face twisted with something like regret. "I didn't plan to kill him. He panicked. He ran. I chased him. In the dark, things happen. You cut his throat." Richard didn't deny it. Silence hung for a long moment. Twigs snapped behind them. Martha, Alfred, Oswin, Corvin, and half a dozen other villagers emerged into the clearing, weapons raised, torches flickering. Richard glanced at them all, tired, bleeding, beaten. He smiled faintly. "Look at that. A whole village for one man. I should be honored." Edric stood. "Richard Thorne, you are accused of murder, theft, coercion, and bringing danger upon Bramford Hollow. You will face judgment." Richard laughed softly. "Judgment? From who? You?" "No," Edric said. "From all of us." The villagers formed a slow circle around Richard. Old Tom, voice shaking, said, "We'll hang if we don't end this now." Martha whispered, "We have no sheriff. No court. No time." Oswin added sharply, "The fine alone will starve us." Their voices trembled, not with anger, but with fear of the crown. Edric raised his hand again. "No one kills him here. Not like this." Richard laughed. "Always the good one, Edric. Even now." "Stand," Edric said. Richard looked at him. "No. Richard." "I said no." Richard reached for his sword. Not quickly. Not to attack. But slowly, deliberately. To die with a weapon in his hand. Edric knew what was coming. He took a single step forward. Richard leaned his head back against the tree, eyes half closed, breath icy in the dawn air. "It was always going to end this way," he murmured. He pulled the blade closer. And Edric lunged. The blade flashed. Not toward Edric. Richard drove it toward his own throat. A cry ripped through the villagers. Edric caught his brother's wrist at the last second. They struggled, the sword trembling inches from Richard's neck. Richard's voice cracked. "Let me die with a shred of dignity." "No. Let me go." "No." Edric tore the blade from his hand and threw it aside. Richard sagged, breath shuddering. The villagers looked at Edric in confusion. Oswin whispered, "What now?" Edric stood slowly, chest heaving. He looked at the rising sun, at the blood on Richard's shirt, at the terrified faces around him, and he made the hardest decision of his life. "We take him back," he said. The villagers recoiled. "What? We'll hang. The crown will kill us all. He murdered a boy." Edric stepped forward. "And turning into murderers ourselves won't save us." Alfred clenched his fists. "Edric, if we do nothing, The king's men will be here by tomorrow. And they'll see justice was done, Edric said. Martha asked quietly, and what justice is that? Edric looked at his brother. His voice softened. The truth. Richard stared back at him with a strange mixture of hate and gratitude. Corvin stepped forward, trembling. Edric, if Richard lives, he'll expose me. The crown will kill me too. Edric placed a hand on Corvin's shoulder. You'll speak the truth. You'll say he forced you. You'll show the bruises. He paused. And we'll stand with you. The villagers murmured. Edric continued, louder. We faced this night together. We solved the murder before dawn. We hunted the killer. We captured him alive. That is what the king's men will see. And if they don't believe us? Oswin asked. Edric turned to the rising sun. They will. How can you be certain? Martha whispered. Edric met her eyes. Because we are not murderers. Not like him. And not like the crown thinks we are. Silence spread through the clearing. Then slowly, one by one, the villagers nodded. Not because they trusted the crown, but because they trusted him. Edric Thorne. Their reeve. Their leader. Their conscience. They bound Richard's hands. Lifted him to his feet. He didn't resist. For the first time, he looked small. Defeated. Human. As they carried him back toward the village, the first rays of dawn stretched across Branford Hollow. By sunrise, the entire mystery was solved. The murderer was found. His accomplice confessed. The stolen silver recovered. The village united. Later that morning, as the sun rose over the fields, Edric stood before the villagers in the square. Justice isn't about power, he said. It's about truth. And today, we proved that even a village without a sheriff can stand together. The villagers bowed their heads. For the first time since Rowan Hale's scream pierced the night, Branford Hollow was quiet. Peaceful. Alive. And when the king's men arrived 2 days later, they saw the truth exactly as Edric promised. The village was spared. Richard Thorne was taken away in chains. Corvin was absolved. And Rowan Hale, whose courage uncovered the first thread of truth, was buried with honor on the hill overlooking the river. Edric placed a single stone on his grave. For justice, he whispered. Then he walked back to the village, the weight of the night forever carved into him. The mystery of Branford Hollow became legend, told for centuries as the story of how a village without a sheriff solved a murder before dawn. And survived. If you want more forgotten stories like this, real cases, real mysteries, and real moments from the past that history books ignore, then make sure to subscribe. Your support helps bring these untold stories back to life.